I received a shocking letter from my cheating fiance's cousin where she reveals her huge secret. My ex, let's call her D, and I were high school sweethearts, although we didn't go to the same high school. We met at work at a restaurant. We hit it off from the word go. It was great. We couldn't spend enough time with each other and were in what I thought real love. Her family loved me, my family loved her. Dee's cousin Shannon became one of my best friends. She would go out with us all the time. We were like the Three Musketeers. By the time we had graduated, we had been together for almost 2 years. I was signed up to go in the army, and she was going to go to college locally. We were devastated and heartbroken. I had seriously considered asking her to marry me before I left for the army. We discussed it and she said she would say yes, but in the end we agreed that we should wait a while. So heartbroken, but certain we would be together forever, I went off to basic training. During basic, I could only call her 3 times, but we wrote letters almost every day. It was a rare day that I didn't have a letter from her at mail call. She came down with my parents for my graduation from basic. It was great to see her, and my belief that we were destined to be together forever was reinforced. After all my training was done, I was stationed at Foothood TX in the 1st Cavalry Division, 1st Team. I ended up spending most of my paychecks on phone calls to her and saving up for plane tickets home or for her to come visit me. I would make it home about every 6 months, and she came to visit me twice in 2 years. Every trip home was a celebration of love. After 2 years of me being in the army, I was ready to pop the question to her. I went down and got a cheap engagement ring and started making my plans for my next trip home. That was the time that I got a letter from her cousin Shannon. Shannon told me that D had been cheating on me. I was crushed. I called Shannon to find out more, and she told me that D had been sneaking around with another guy and that when she had confronted her on it, D had stated it was just fooling around and that I was still her future husband. I asked Shannon who it was D was fooling around on me with. At first, Shannon didn't want to tell me because she said she didn't want to cause even more problems. That told me that it was someone that I knew, and I convinced Shannon to tell me. It was one of my best friends that I had gone to school with, and we had been friends since junior high. Let's call him M. I asked Shannon not to tell D that I knew and that I had been planning on coming home soon to surprise D and ask her to marry me, but now it was to confront her. So I went home about a week later to confront D and M. I went to D's house, but she wasn't home, so then I went over to M's trashy apartment and lo and behold, whose car should I see outside but D's. I knocked on the door and it was answered by M's roommate, who as it turns out was also an acquaintance of mine, wouldn't call him a friend really, and he just stood there stuttering. I asked him if I could come in and talk to my good friend M. He tried to make some awkward excuse, but when I told him I saw M's car outside, he let me in. As soon as I walked in, I could hear M and D in his bedroom getting it on. She was always loud, one reason why I liked her so much. He yelled down the hall to tell M that he had company, then sat down on the couch to watch the show. It took about 5 more minutes for M and D to come out of the bedroom. My heart was crushed when I saw her come walking out of his bedroom with a smile on her face. The smile didn't last long when she saw me standing there in the dining room. I just stood there for a minute staring at her. She started to make some excuse and I just turned around and walked out. I was devastated. I went into a tailspin of depression. I returned to Foothood and just went on autopilot. For the first few weeks, I got a lot of letters from D asking for me to forgive her and for me to call her and let her explain. I never responded to her. I loved D so much that if I had seen her or called her, I would have ended up forgiving her, and then I would have spent my life with a woman that I could never trust. I did call Shannon a few times, and she told me that D was upset and mad that I wouldn't give her a second chance. Maybe if it hadn't have been one of my best friends I could have, but the sense of betrayal I felt was just too great. I never could have trusted her again. Life went on. I lost contact with Shannon and all my old friends from before I went in the army. I met another woman and eventually married and had a son. Almost 20 years had passed since my heart had been torn out of my chest. When my son was playing pee-wee football, I was at one of his practices, and who should walk up but Shannon. Her son was on the same team as my boy. After a little bit of small talk, she told me that after D and I broke up, she and M had kept seeing each other. Dee got pregnant about a year after we broke up, and as soon as M heard the word pregnant, he went running for the hills. Dee was left as a single mom with a lot of regrets. Dee has not had another relationship that has lasted longer than 3 months. Shannon told me that to this day Dee says I was the love of her life and that no guy has ever held a candle to me, and that she wished she could go back in time and keep herself from ducking up the best thing that had ever happened to her words not mine. Shannon wanted to set up a lunch with Dee and I to help her get past this, but I told her not to even tell Dee that she had seen me. Seeing her would still hurt too much. To this day I have trust issues. I don't really have good male friends, just acquaintances. There is a part of me that is trying to protect me from further pain and keeps me from opening up to my wife. Don't get me wrong, I love my wife and I will never do anything to jeopardize my marriage. I still feel though that Dee was the love of my life, and if she somehow walked back into my life today, I would be hard-pressed not to fall for her again. I drove 10 hours to see my partner, but when I arrived I heard a sound coming from her room that nobody ever wants to hear. Well, 4 years ago I dated a girl who I thought was perfect for me in every way. We had the same kind of dark humor, we were both interested in the same sort of activities and music. We could spend hours just talking about nothing and everything at the same time. The kind of person that you just want to leave everything behind and go see the world with her. Visit the highest mountains, explore the deepest valleys, everything. We had the same philosophy about children, in that neither of us wanted children. We'd go out to eat, and if there was a large group of children we'd get our food to go. Her parents loved me, her friends loved me. I didn't know anybody in town, since I had just moved there shortly before me and her started dating, and she said that I was the most patient and understanding boyfriend she ever had. We attended college in different states, but we made it work. She spent a week at my school with me since my classes started a week earlier than hers did, and after she left we'd talk on Skype and text each other all day. Then, things started changing a little bit. She'd talk to me less or seem less excited about talking to me. So, during a few-day break I had from school, I went up to visit her. We spent 3 days together and worked everything out again, and things seemed perfectly fine. A couple months later it started happening again. She'd talk to me less and always be busy partying with her friends, who I all knew. A couple of her friends lived a couple houses down from my parents. I just shrugged it off, figured that she just needed me to be around physically more and that the long distance was straining on her. So, I decided I'd surprise her. Unfortunately, being a poor college student with no job and no car, I couldn't just drive up there. I didn't have enough money for a plane ticket, or a bus ticket, or anything like that either. I packed my backpack with some essential supplies, packed a duffel bag with about 4 days' worth of clothes, and went over to the truck stop right off the interstate and asked a couple of truckers which way they were headed. It took me 15 hours to get there, 500 miles, normally 10 hours just driving, which wasn't too bad all considering. I changed semi-trucks 4 times, and I borrowed my brother's pickup truck when I got to the town that my parents lived in, about 400 miles from where my college was. Her college was 100 miles from there. Got there pretty late. When I got there her roommates, who I knew from the previous time I had been up there, told me that she wasn't there, but that I could just sleep in her room while I waited for her. So, I did. The next morning when I woke up, she still hadn't shown up, so I decided to text her. I said, "Hey, what's up?" She replied, "Not much, just hanging out with my friend Zane." I was a little suspicious at this point, but I didn't let it get to me. I asked her roommates where Zane lived, and they told me which dorm he lived in. I headed over there, leaving my clothes in her room, but taking my backpack. I got to the 3rd floor where he lived, and I looked for his name on one of the doors. I got to the end of the hall and saw his first name, Zane. I knocked on the door, no answer. Knocked again, no answer. I figured she was probably hanging out with him somewhere else on campus, so I headed back down the hallway towards the stairs. As I started walking down the stairs, I paused at the top step and pulled out my pack of cigarettes so I could smoke on my way back across campus. Then I heard it. That sound that nobody ever wants to hear. That heartbreaking, soul-crushing sound that takes out all the color in the world. My mind started racing, my heart beat fast and my muscles tensed up. I turned back around and opened up the window nearby and stuck my head out. I needed some air. I probably stood there for 30 seconds with my head out the window. I looked at the sun. For such a cold, late fall day, it sure was shining bright. I looked back at the door behind me. His name was on it, plain as day. Zane. I guess I had missed it when I first looked. I knocked on the door, loud and hard, but I wasn't quite sure what to say, so I just said the first thing that came to mind. "Hey, come out here." The sound stopped. "Room service," the guy said. I chuckled to myself, I don't know why. I knocked again. "I know you're in there." "Girl Scout cookies?" "Leave them by the door," he said. I realized then that she didn't know that it was me knocking on the door. I had been getting more and more anxious as time went on, and I realized that I was still holding a cigarette in my hand. I stepped outside, propping the door open with my backpack. I sent her a text again. "D," it said. She sent me back a text pretty quick. "What? Why don't you come outside and we'll talk?" I said back. "Kaylock. I'm smoking another cigarette, please come outside." She hadn't come out by the time I finished the second one, so I went back upstairs. I knocked on the door again, this time lightly. I didn't say anything. The sheer weight of the situation was starting to come down on me, and every muscle in my body felt fatigued. After a couple seconds she opened the door. In the background I saw the guy dart into the closet. She gave a small, defeated-looking smile that said, "Hey." She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She walked out, looking like a puppy with its tail between its legs. She was on the verge of crying. I put my hands on her shoulders. "I'm so upset right now, it's taking every ounce of my existence to keep from yelling right now. Can we go outside and talk so I can smoke another cigarette?" In the quietest voice imaginable she said, "Okay." The world was crumbling around my head. I tried to be as strong as I could, but it was tough. We sat outside for about 2 hours, talking. She had just started sleeping with him the night before. She had met him a week before when she went to the pet store, where he worked. It was over at that point. After we talked outside, we fought for about 12 hours in her dorm room. And then we fought over text for 2 months. I saw her one more time when I went to visit my parents. She still hung out with my brother, and that went badly. Very badly. But that's another story. In the end, the guy she cheated on me with got her pregnant, and they both dropped out of school. She was a freshman, he was a senior with 1 semester left. Neither of them have gone back to school. She moved to another city 4 hours away from where my, and her, parents lived to live with his parents. As I said, that was 4 years ago, so their kid is almost 3 now. She's depressed, has very few friends, and is separated from the guy, but they are still together. She doesn't trust him, so they each moved into their own places even though they are still dating. I can tell that she probably wishes she never had a kid. She was never the kind of person to ever want children.